All right, guys, let's get started. Dr. Johnson was supposed to give me this long introduction. I told him, I was like, I don't want that introduction. We're just going to forgo that. I'll give you guys my own personal introduction because it was geared in the wrong direction of who I am. So forget that introduction. I'll give you the other stuff. I can tell you hands down that this group is probably the most dedicated group of everybody in this building because you guys are coming in to listen to stuff about agriculture, right? So that means that you probably have a little bit of a different insight and think a little bit broader in regards to the whole conversation around health and where it all originates at, right? And so there's so many facets to health, but I'm gonna bring this all back to what we do on a day-to-day basis, but I really, in giving this presentation, I want to make you a more educated consumer. That is really my goal at the end of this conversation. And I told someone this yesterday. We had a guest at the ranch yesterday. And I told him, when I was the consumer only, I didn't know what to ask. When I became the producer, I started learning what to ask. And I started seeing the things that you can't see just standing on the consumer side, right? And that's what I'm going to share with all of you today. So quick introduction about who we are. Dr. Arlen Hill, my wife Leah Hill in the back. We are Harvest Hills Ranch. So when you ask, well, you know, how many employees do you have and all that? We are it, guys. Everything runs through us. And you'll see why that's important. So my background is I grew up in agriculture. Now I grew up in a different world of agriculture than where I'm at now. I grew up in the conventional model. So row crops. I'm from North Carolina, tobacco farms, like that was my childhood, right? And then I go off to college, chiropractic school, spend my time in clinical practice, and I start to realize we got a massive gap here. I'm asking patients to go out and to do things and to find food sources that they can't find. I'm personally at this same time going to the farmer's market and realizing that I'm getting hoodwinked at the farmer's market. And this is not in any way meant to bash the farmer's market, so please don't take it that way, but also in looking at how we were going to bring product that we were going to produce to the consumer. How are we going to do that? And we thought, well, you know what? Farmers markets are an avenue to do it, but first let us do our due diligence and see what's out there. And we went to 3 farmers markets, and I hate to be the one to tell you this, they were all in this area, and we quickly made the decision, this ain't what we're doing, right? We're not getting entwined with this. This is not who we want to project ourselves to be. And so all of that to tell you that Harvest Hills Ranch evolved out of where we saw a need. If I couldn't send someone faithfully to go get it, I was going to produce it and make it for them. And that's just how we evolved, right? And so I run our operation with my clinical knowledge in the background, pushing the decisions that we make. Somebody asked me earlier, well, how do you increase the nutrient density in your food? It's how I manage our systems. It's how I manage our animals. There's a thought process that has to go into it, that it's not just going out and turning cows out into a pasture or going out and moving chickens across a pasture every day or letting the birds out in the morning. There's so much more that goes into it than that. I want to do this short little video just so folks can see what happens in the day of a life of a regenerative rancher. Most of you, if you envision my day, you would probably think, you know, me with the cowboy boots, got the cowboy hat on, I'm running things around the ranch. Most of my day is spent behind a computer because I've honed the systems down, but it's driving the knowledge into the actions that we take to get that end product to be what it is supposed to be. So we've been doing this for about 8 years now. And here's where I want to show you, I want to walk you through where we're at, big picture, and then I'm going to take you through what is impacting you on a day-to-day basis, all right? So let me just quote a few things to you here. Most of this you guys know, but let's just put this all in perspective. And this is just last year. 129 million people in the U.S. had at least one major chronic disease: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, autoimmunity, hypertension. How many people do you know that have at least one of those, right? Every one of us knows somebody that's in that camp. And knowing what the population of the United States is at 129 million, and these are diagnosed, How many people are undiagnosed or at least on the track into one of those named conditions or some other chronic disease? It's huge. So we've got a massive problem here, and all of us can appreciate that this conversation is not deflating in any way. This conversation is only growing. So without belaboring that point anymore, here's what I challenge all of you to say, because we as humans, and myself included, we all tend to do this. If something happens, that's happening to them, right? It's not happening to me. So it doesn't bother me. But here's what I want to challenge you with. Just ask yourself rhetorically as I look at some of these statements with you. Could you sleep better on a day-to-day basis? Could you sleep more restful on a day-to-day basis? You could, right? That goes all the way back to what I do out in the pastures to ultimately try to bring products to you guys, right? So it's all an uphill process. Could your gut be healthier? We've all had those days where your gut's just like, I'm eating good, I think I'm eating good, but what the heck is going on with my gut? I don't know why my gut is not happy today. We've all had those days. And then you look at your dietary choices. Are they compromising? Now be honest with yourself. Don't answer this out loud. But how many of you have made a choice and said, I know this is not the absolute best choice that I could be making, but I'm going to make this choice because it feels like it's the best choice in the moment right now, right? We've been there too. Are you functionally aging, or are you a function of aging? That's a big one. And that probably for none of us are running from that question, okay? And let me frame up the aging process for you. When you age, at some point you should just fall off a cliff, right? But most of us like to take this slow, steady stroll downhill in the aging process and continue to decline. That shouldn't be the way aging works. Aging is a functional process. So if we take actions to maintain our functionality, of which nutrition is the foundation of, we can legitimately say that we can offset the aging process. That is not a far-fetched statement. That is a scientifically backed statement. Okay? So, and you can see where I'm going with this. So we've really got to be thinking in regards to a new paradigm here. So in regards to what I'm going to share with you today, we're going to look at the link between the food system and health. And I really want to shine light on this food system component here, because we see little snippets of it starting to stare at us and starting to become louder out there, but then over time it dwindles away and it starts talking in a different format, and then that dwindles away. But every time something happens in the food system and it dwindles away, it should put a mark in your mind that this system is fragile. Everything that we as humans do, we should position ourselves to be anti-fragile, not submitting ourselves to being fragile. So the goal of quantity over quality. I'm going to project that to you as well and show you where, even where it appears that there is quality, there is not quality. And I'm going to bring you into the full scope of what it looks like to take an animal from the pasture and put it on your plate. Because there's a lot of steps in that process that you never get exposed to, that you absolutely as the consumer have to be aware of, right? And intentionally you are not told about these steps. So we're going to look at the acceptance of compromised foods, simple changes for big impact, and then I'm going to present all of you with a special offer here to keep you educated, all right? Irony of declining food. I wanted to put more pictures like that up there, but just in the sake of having a nice image, right, we're going to stick with that one. Say what you will about that. So here's the funny thing about that though. We're told now that we have more access to food. It's at an all-time high that we have availability to more food than we have ever had at any point in our history. But yet we don't have health. Where's the misalignment there, all right? So there's more organic choices out there. You have options that are non-GMO. You have the greatest variety. Any grocer that you walk into, whether it's an extremely large one or one of the small mom and pops, you're going to see a large variety on that. There's enhanced knowledge about toxins in the food supply. Everybody's like, at this point, talking about glyphosate is so apropos. Like, nobody wants to talk about glyphosate anymore because that's old news. Like, that's a forgotten story, only it's not. It's just as prevalent as it ever was. And if it's not glyphosate, it's just a different name. It's atrazine, it's dioxins. I mean, pick your poison, right? But yet we have more knowledge about this, but it's not being dealt with. And then you look at the realization of the importance of nutrition. Everybody, like, who doesn't take a supplement now? Everybody takes supplements, but yet we're still nutrient deficient. Even with the supplementation, hear me, even with the supplementation, the supply is not meeting your metabolic demand. Think about that for a minute. That means that fundamentally something is missing. And how do we get here? So that's what I'm leading you up to. So here's the hidden story behind this. This is what you don't see, is that the system is not who you think it is. And let me use the beef industry, and I'm choosing those terminologies specifically. Let me give you the example of the beef industry. There are 4 packers in the United States in the beef industry. 4. They're not U.S.-owned companies with the exception of 1. Think about that for a minute, right? So right off the bat, they don't have your best interest in mind, okay? They control 80% of the cattle process, 80% of the cattle processing in the United States. 80%. Okay? This is a centralized system. This is ran by a small group of individuals that, if you guys reflect back to what took place in the pandemic, these processing facilities got shut down. And what happened to your meat supply? Cut off. In 2 or 3 days, it got cut off, right? That's why. And so you look at farmers, gardeners, ranchers, agriculturalists, all these folks that you think are who drive your food production, they're not. We're not the guys, and when I say we in this context, I'm talking about the bigger we, okay? Not the regenerative folks like myself, but the bigger we. It's all one big system here. And here's probably the most important part about this, is that these production models that you see, whether it's a label that attracts you or whether it's a label on a food that still looks conventional, listen to what I'm getting ready to say. The production models for all of them are the same. They're not different. None of them are different. And that's what they don't want you to know, okay? So let me give you an example, because you're thinking, man, this guy's fired up. He's talking a good story here. But what's the evidence for what he's saying? Okay, well, just to drive this and really put this in your backyard, this is Costco off of 242, okay? So how organic is organic? Well, let's just answer that for a moment. And just to show you the labels, you can go to Fulton Valley Farms. You can go validate all of this for yourself. On their website, it specifically says available at Costco. Okay, so this is the company. This is the packaging. And you look at that and you see it's organic. So that's the first check mark, right? You got a little giddy when you saw the organic. You're like, yeah, I'm buying organic. This is good stuff, right? And then you see it's free range. Heck yeah, organic free range. Don't get no better than that, right? And then you see vegetarian diet. Yes, sir. That's hitting all my buttons. And no animal byproducts. And this last one down here says no antibiotics ever. Okay? So you look at that and you think, money. This is what we're eating for dinner right here, right? Except this is the reality of where it's raised at. Now, I don't know about you guys, but bare brown soil doesn't look healthy to me. Right? I'd be doing 1,000 things different to try to change that landscape, right? There is nothing, even if you didn't know anything about agriculture, there is nothing in that image that screams out to you health and wellness. Nothing. If nature can't be healthy, how's it going to take any of that and transfer it to you? It can't. This is the reality, and this is on their website. So they're projecting this out there, like this is what they're promoting, right? And this is the due diligence that you as the consumer have to do. Do not trust a label. When you go and look at this, this is what their idea of free range is. This is their idea of organic. And I want you to note something here. And this is the kind of thing I'm getting ready to show you that you don't know to look for unless you're standing on my side of the fence. No pun intended. Those right there, those are T-posts. T-posts require you to take a driver and drive them in the ground. You're not picking them up and pulling them out. When I have to remove those, I have to hook a tractor to them and pull them out of the ground. So this is not mobile at all. These birds aren't going and tomorrow they're going to be over here somewhere. No, that is where they are living their existence at. And look at this. Is that an entire mobile structure? No, it is a stationary structure. And you guys' stomachs starting to turn, right? This is what you're not being told, okay? Now, we're still on the Costco topic here. So look at this. This is the shocking truth that's a reality out there. And this is the part that nobody wants you to know about. When you look at free-range organic chicken, most of it has been processed in the same facilities that process conventional chicken. So all the toxins that they use to clean those birds with going through a conventional facility, all the work that even if the organic and the free-range was done correctly, just went to heck. It just went away. You just lost it. You can take any animal and raise that animal right, do it everything correct, and the processor screw it up. And notice that these guys are using large industrial facilities. We use small mom and pop locations just like us that are USDA inspected, that we can actually have the conversation, that are using hydrogen peroxide as the disinfectant, something that is inherently produced in the human body, right? That's the way it should be done. You shouldn't expose it to all these chemicals. And notice here, there's a couple of things, and if you guys really want to dig into this for yourself, there is an entire website now that is fully dedicated to chasing down all the things that Costco as a company, as a bigger company is doing that's problematic as it relates to chickens. And notice on this, I want you guys to acknowledge a few things here. It's going to be hard for you to see. But they spent $1 billion to build this processing facility in Nebraska. And they built, I think it was, 500. Think about this number, 500 chicken houses. And you guys ever seen one of these chicken houses like this? You know how many birds they put in each one of those? 42,000. Is that what you want to eat? That's what we're looking at. So how do we get played? These companies are playing us like the violin, right? How do we get played like this? Well, you got to be honest with yourself on this. You put faith and trust in faceless entities. You're putting faith in labels, not people. Can you shake the hand of that label? No, but this is the mistake we do. We develop label lust, right? My wife's going to shoot me for doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So if you look at this and you think about, if you literally compare what I'm getting ready to tell you about label lust to a relationship, it's ridiculous how much it tracks, how much they're analogous to each other, right? So if you think about, I'm looking at that label and it, just like I showed you with the other one, it says organic, it says free range. And every time you read one of those terms, it's a little hit of dopamine, right? It's a little tickle to your pleasure centers in your brain. Is exactly what's happening, right? It's just like foreplay with your partner, right? I told you guys were going to laugh at this, right? And my wife's going to shoot me later. But it's the exact same thing that's associated with it, right? And then you walk up to the checkout and you walk out of the store and you think, I just made the best decision. And that's your climax, right? You feel so euphoric about what you just did. And then you get home and you realize they just cheated on you. Because now you learn the truth of what I'm sitting here telling you, and everything that you put all your faith and hope in is not true. It's not reality, right? We create this false reality in our mind as we read those labels. We start literally drawing these pictures out in our head of how these animals are raised in this utopic environment. And it's not the truth. It's just a factor of what's on that label. So if you catch yourself in this label lust scenario, back yourself out of it. Put the product down and realize what you're doing, okay? We read into packaging, we get attached to brands. You know, I've seen this. I remember when Applegate was a thing. People would always talk about going and buying Applegate. And Applegate got bought out and they still do use the brand name of Applegate. And this is not to pick on them, but Applegate is not the Applegate of past, but people still get so fixated into the name of Applegate, right? And there's many examples of that. We're not asking enough questions. We become naive. Oh, they wouldn't do that. Surely they're not putting finances ahead of my own personal health interests. Surely they're not, right? They are. Flashy marketing, convenience over quality. This one is huge. We have to acknowledge that if you're going to do anything right, you guys have seen this in all facets of your life. Everything takes a little more effort if it's worth having and doing. Everything. So you have to do the same, you have to have the same mindset with food. So here's a couple of more examples on this that, again, I shot these at the local Costco here, but you can see the organic ground beef, and what you don't see on the back of this label, it cut off a little bit, but this is the back of that packaging. It tells you absolutely nothing other than what organization certified it. And on the front of these, they like to put the USDA organic, and inherently you see that and you go, oh, the USDA certified this organic. No, they didn't. The USDA did not certify that organic. They farmed that out to somebody else to go do that work for them, is what they did. And they're not checking every lot of every product that's coming through to make sure that it is meeting that standard. They're just not doing it, right? The bison, this one says all natural. All natural means is that they weren't given any type of chemical. They weren't given hormones, or they weren't given any type of injection. But it doesn't tell you anything about how the animal was raised, what the animal was fed, what system they were ran in. And then you come down to the organic young chicken, right? It's got the organic. You got excited when you saw organic. I'm going to make a good choice here. But notice on this, same story here. They don't define any of the organic certification, any of that type of thing, and you have to look at all that. But notice on this, the hatch, raised, and harvested in the USDA. That kind of makes you feel good. But think about this for a minute. Why does it say pasture raised? Why don't they put that on there if that's what they're doing? If it's really organic, you should immediately, as the consumer, acknowledge that organic has some limitations. If it's not at a minimum on pasture and these animals, these chickens, aren't being allowed to express the chickenness of a chicken, right? If that's not happening, it's not the product you're after. Unless you think I'm just up here on a rant, okay? This is scientific evidence. And this is just one of multiple studies that are out there now that clearly and evidently show that animals that are raised on pasture have a higher and more diverse nutritional value than animals that are pen finished, right? That evidence is concrete. We can stand on that all day long. So let's recap this slippery slope. There's a universally declining health. It's progressing, it's not regressing, and truly, guys, there is no middle ground in this conversation. You're either going downhill or you're going uphill, right? You're not just standing still. You got to be moving in this conversation. We have an industrial system that recognizes your profit potential. That's the priority goal here. There's an abundance of food, but it's not making you healthier. The marketing that makes us feel good about our choices, and they know it. They know how to play us, right? We're the violin. And it's a food system, and keep in mind this one key word. Of all the things that I'm saying to you, if you have to focus on one key word in my presentation, it is transparency. And you should, when you look at labels, ask yourself, how are they being transparent? Or flip it the other way, how are they not being transparent? And if you keep asking that question, you will ultimately lead yourself to the answer of whether that's a product you should purchase or not. Okay? Transparency is what it's at. And we as the populace, we have taken the bait. So how do we get out of this? Well, I want to show you a couple of examples here. And the question is, can regenerative agriculture truly create change? Can it realistically do that? And first of all, what is regenerative agriculture? Regenerative agriculture, as the name tends to imply, is that you're regenerating. But I think about this differently, having seen this firsthand, is that the system gets better and better and better and better year after year, is what that really is saying. And that means that every time it gets better, there's more cycles that are being fulfilled in the environment. There's more interaction with the microbes in the ground and the plants taking that nutrition in by virtue of those microbes facilitating that. Those animals, whether they're pecking at it and eating some of that grass and those bugs, or whether the cows are eating that and taking in that nutrition into their rumen and facilitating that back out into the meat,
However that looks, it is a continual upward progression. Think back a minute to the example I gave you where we looked at that turkey farm, right? Did anything in that look regenerating to you? No, it looked exactly the opposite. Now, you'll see terms that are regenerative, sustainable, organic. There can be some overlap in these. All of these can be valuable terms, but understand that these all have limitations. If you're trying to figure out, well, how do I make sense out of that? I have literally done videos that you can go to Harvest Hills Ranch on YouTube, and I do a comparison on every single one of these. Regenerative versus sustainable, sustainable versus organic, organic versus regenerative, right? We can understand those differences, but here's my goal to you on this. Don't get fixated on these terms, because organic, as I'm going to show you, is not organic of yesteryear. And the same thing is going to happen to these other terms, but hold that thought. When you look at the ideology behind regeneration, it's about the people, it's about the animals, it's about the environment, it's about a full spectrum picture. It's not about producing a product in the moment. And so, non-regenerative land, regenerative land. This is actually an image of the same location. This is what would be sustainable practices, right? So many of you would think, well, sustainable at what standard, right? Sustainable can be absolutely wonderful, and it should be something to aspire to, but it can also be a letdown. And this is why we have to ask questions and not give up control as the consumer. And so if you look at this, all the things that are encompassed in regenerative agriculture, you drive it from the sun coming in, stimulating, you get the water coming down from the plants. I'll point out things on here that we see just personally. Like you see the rabbit on here. I have an abundance of rabbits around our place. I ain't raising rabbits. What are they doing? Well, they're out there in the pastures eating the grass because they know it's wonderful grass. I joke with our neighbors sometimes, I'm feeding his deer herd because the property adjacent to us, they pretty much only have the property to hunt with. But we're getting beautiful deer, but they're out in my pastures eating the grass that is a byproduct of our practices and growing beautiful antlers, right? And so it's just one example. Dung beetles. You guys familiar with dung beetles, right? Take the manure down in the ground. We had, I think, maybe one species of dung beetle, if I remember when we started. We have multiple species of dung beetles. In the summer, in the growing season, these animals, our cows, as we're moving them daily or multiple times per day, depending on what our goals are, when they lay down their manure and I move them away, 12 hours after I move them, the dung beetles have already gone through and pulled all that manure in the ground. In 12 hours. That's how plentiful the dung beetle population is. Regenerative practices facilitate that, not conventional practices. So let's take a quick look back at history here for a minute. And this is where I come into the term around organic. And really, if you look at organic is organic dilution. I showed you the example with the turkey, and what's ultimately happening here is something known as greenwashing. And this is something that marketing companies know. They know how you respond. They know you get giddy. They know you have label lust. They know that. And they know that the more that they can tickle your pleasure centers in your brain with those labels, the more likelihood you're going to buy that product. So if you're trying to figure out what that is, think about the green movement, right, which is a good thing, right? It's all the regenerative practices could fall under that, but brainwashing. It's using the ideology in the green movement to get you to take a certain action. That is greenwashing, right? It's all based around buzzwords and trying to project authority with labels and these types of things. You're interested in concepts, not labels. So here's the regenerative connection to health. Proven nutrient density. I showed you that with the animals being raised in the setting that they're in a regenerative pasture-raised setting. You have an avoidance of pervasive toxic chemicals. Through all of this, I've put a lot of emphasis on the nutrition and there being more. I've talked about what's in the product, right? I've talked about highlighting that aspect, but it's also an equally relevant conversation to talk about what's not in the product. That's just as important. And so when you do regenerative practices, this tickles me. So someone will ask, well, what do you use for a wormer? Or what do you use for a fly control? Nothing. I don't use anything. My cows don't have these problems. Well, what about when they have, pink eye and stuff like that? I don't have cows with pink eye. I don't know what to tell you, right? It's not an issue. Well, what do you vaccinate them with? Nothing. I don't vaccinate my cows. They don't need vaccines. They're not they're not having issues. Why would I do any of these things, right? And when you hear these arguments that it can't be done, it can be done. We're proof it can be done. And it can be done year over year over year with no problem, okay? It's a perpetual system that doesn't break down over time. And most importantly, guys, whether you have a relationship with me and Leah or some other ranch, I don't care who it is, right? My goal, and I'm very emphatic about this, my goal is not to feed the world. I want to feed the people that are interested in optimal food, in high nutrient density food. But I don't need to be the only one out there. If it's not going to be a centralized system, which I definitely would not advocate because that's what we have now, we see the pitfalls. Just look at what's going on with the eggs right now. If it's going to be a decentralized system, there needs to be a lot of folks out there that are doing regenerative practices and serving numbers of people, right? That's how the system should work. We shouldn't be, the whole ideology that in the United States, and this still boggles my mind, you guys will hear about beef coming in from South America and out of the country. They're doing the same thing with chicken. And this isn't something that started yesterday. This has been going on for years. Why do we need chicken resourced from outside of the country? The logic behind this makes no sense, right? But this is, you got to connect with your farmers, the point here, and then ultimately connect to your food. So what does regenerative agriculture in motion look like? So you can see those are some happy cows right there. You know, I can walk around our cows and those cows are just like, what are you doing here? You just hanging out, came to have a conversation, like you got some hay for me, like what's going on, right? They're just chill. This is our chicken flock, and you can see that mobile structure. That mobile structure gets continuously moved across the pastures. If you go look at our pastures right now where we just got some warm weather, we had some warm weather, right? And so it just gave enough of that flush of green. You can see these spots of green in intervals. And then you go over here and you see this another line of spots of green in intervals. That's all the manure being benefiting the pastures from the animals, right? So it's allowing these systems to all integrate. This is what, remember this number, 42,000 birds per house, right? I never put over 30 in there. I never exceed that limit with them, never, right? So those guys get moved every single day. And literally, I was talking about the guest that came out yesterday. We were showing him how we have just rows of green where each one of these have been. There's 12 of these. And there's 12 rows of green, right? Just fertilizing that pasture. We're taking a waste and making it an asset. And then we've got a dairy cow there, right? And you can see that that's a real picture. That's not a Photoshop picture. That's me just hanging on her, and she's just as chill as she can be. She don't care, right? She's good, right? So here's why regenerative ag is the jumpstart that needs to be the foundation for all of healthcare. It is about experiencing a healthy, more nourishing food. And so when you think about how food can ultimately just be your primary fuel source, if you run a high octane fuel in your vehicle, you're going to get better performance out of it. Same thing with the food you eat. If it's high octane, all the better. Clean, chemical free, I probably don't need to elaborate on that. Optimizes gut function. I see this a lot of times, and I definitely saw this more, like when I was in clinical practice, I saw this a lot, where folks would think that they were making good decisions, and they would do the things they would do good testing, they would do the right supplementation, but they never could quite turn that corner. They could get to 90%, but they couldn't get to 100% of resolution. And a lot of it came back down to the food choices and the sourcing of what they were doing. And so this can be huge. And we know how beneficial the gut is to everything in the body, right? So you have to put the right fuel source in, reducing our chronic diseases, boosting overall well-being and mental clarity, having enough protein there to supercharge the brain and produce all those different neurochemicals, neurotransmitters. That's all. Regenerative agriculture is the foundation for all of that. So here's your conscious purchasing decision. So let your purchasing decision be the foundation for your health. Like literally, when you go to buy a food, the question you should be asking yourself is not what's on the label, but how is this food going to impact my health? How is this going to influence how I feel when I wake up in the morning? That's how we should think about our buying decisions. Your current buying decisions give you peace of mind, or do your current buying decisions give you peace of mind that you're creating wellness? You can answer that one for yourself. Do they build enthusiasm or simply provide sustenance? It's just getting me through to the next meal. And that's the whole convenience factor. And that's where we can't get stuck in convenience, and we have to acknowledge there's at least going to be a little bit of work in this that we have to do. Now I'll show you how you can simplify that. Do your current purchases feed the food system, or do they give you freedom of choice? How many of you want freedom of choice? Right? Every one of us want that. And then when the next food shortage hits, is your family's meal secure? That's a reality, guys. In the last 5 years, if you look at all the things that have happened, that may be a short-term problem, but it is still a realistic problem. And you have to acknowledge it now, okay? So, again, I've stood up here, I've said a lot of things to you, but is there really a difference, right? Is there really a difference on this? Well, let's see what here says. She says, my family absolutely loves the quality and taste of their meat products. When my supply runs low and I have to supplement with store-bought meat, we can tell a difference in taste and how our body feels. That's obvious, right? When you can tell that there is more nutrition in the food that you're eating, that you're not eating cardboard. Like, I hate eating chicken if I have to travel now because it just doesn't taste like chicken. I'm used to succulent, juicy, moist chicken, right? And it just doesn't taste like that. And so, a couple of things to note on this. So, a lot of times we get asked, well, what do you do? Well, we're transparent. That's my goal from day one, is be transparent. Tell people what you do. Set yourself apart. And so we are health-focused ranchers. That is our intention, is to drive health. So we know the source of our food. There's a mindset of quality over quantity. We're not just trying to increase yield. It's about transparency, a nutrient-first focus, and ultimately being faithful stewards to the land that we're in front of, right? That's our goal. And so here's what I'm going to offer to you. If you want an opportunity for nature's perfect perfection, we're doing a giveaway right now, and this is an opportunity to win 10 pounds of our ancestral blend. This is a 15% organ blend, 85% ground blend. And for those of you that are not fans of organ meat and have trouble stomaching that, this is for you, right? You'll never know that there's organ meat in here. But this is a great way to get that in. But again, we're doing this as a giveaway. And for those of you that want to take action on this, just scan that QR code. You can scan that QR code and enter and have a chance to be involved in that giveaway. Have a chance for us to send you that 10 pounds of that grass-finished beef. Okay. And if for some reason anyone can't get this on their phone, we also just stop by the booth downstairs. We have a same code down there. You can scan it down there. Okay. Okay. So, what questions do you guys have?
Where can we buy your meat?
Okay, so we have a booth downstairs, right? And if you come by the booth, we'll show you how to get them onto our website. So we serve all of Texas and the surrounding states around Texas. Like I told you, I'm not interested in feeding the world, okay? I'm really interested in feeding Texas, but we have some good friends in Louisiana, so I like the Louisianans too, right? So we want to make sure we get those guys covered. You can go to harvesthillsranch.com, and on that you'll see all of our practices. Again, we're being transparent, but you will also see all of the products that we offer. Grass-fed and finished beef, pasture-raised chicken, pasture-raised, free-range, however you prefer to say that, duck and chicken eggs, and free-range or pastured turkey. Okay? And unlike everybody else, and everybody else in this context meaning the folks that I talked about in this presentation, right, who aren't clear about what these terms actually mean, we're actually clear about what these terms mean. We'll actually tell you when we say pasture raised, we'll elaborate on what pasture raised means in our context, so you can actually feel good about what you're getting, right?
Do you guys plan on doing lamb at any time?
I'm not saying I won't consider it, but here's the hesitation I have with lamb, is that it requires a very specific species of sheep here because of where we're at in terms of the climate. It's a very warm climate. Sheep are very susceptible to parasites because of their eating pattern. And so if you don't have, say, like a St. Croix or a breed like that, that's really established out of the Caribbean area and those types of regions, they're not going to make it here. It's just difficult for them. So it's on our docket, but we really want to be good at what we do and serve the people that we serve really well before we take on anything else.
Okay. Another thing, what are the other three countries that, I would think China, as far as where the meat selection is coming from for our country? You said there were three others.
Yeah, it's the processors. There's 4 processors, yeah.
And where are they?
Brazil is one of them. China is one. And one of them's U.S. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know Brazil and China are in that mix.
Okay.
Yes.
I have 2 young children, and convenience over quality is a big, or quality over convenience is huge for our family. But like not trusting the label and all the things, like sometimes it kind of feels hard to survive. Where I'm spending, I'm in a co-op in my neighborhood getting vegetables and fruit from a local farmer, and I'm going to the farmer's market every Saturday because we're getting our raw milk and we're getting, Pasture pork because we won't eat pork that's not, from a farmer's market. But then people like you come in here and it's like the farmer's market, they're hoodwinking you, and it's like, okay, so if I can't trust them and I can't trust the grocery stores, it just kind of it gets into this cycle of like I can't trust anyone, and I'm gonna have to go live on a farm with my kids and do this all by myself, and it just feels so overwhelming at times.
Can I respond to that before we
Yes,
go on?
please.
So I'm not trying to discount the farmers market. Please don't take that anything I said in that direction, okay? Because there are some very good farmers markets out there. And we've had experience with them too and visited them. So I'll give credit where credit's due. My point in all of this is to say that you as the consumer have to get your hands dirty. You have to ask questions, and you have to not be scared to ask hard questions. And if you came to me and you asked me a hard question and I start doing this, that's a red flag. I should be able to look you in the face, shake your hand, and answer that question with absolute authority. And if they can't do that, you need to go to the next one.
Yeah, okay.
Let me get him.
Yeah, so I'm a young married man, and we're kind of on a budget, and I'm just curious what tips you would provide for like trying to live out these principles, but also stick to a good budget and not be spending like, obviously I probably wouldn't be able to afford a prime ribeye, but maybe like your ground beef, maybe, I don't know. Like, what would you suggest?
Yeah, don't make that assumption. Don't make that assumption at all. Like I'll give you the example with eggs right now. We're actually, and I don't get into price because I think that's the wrong conversation to get into, but we're actually better priced than the stores right now, right? And here's the other thing about that. Our prices don't fluctuate because I'm not beholden to the system in any way. So prices fluctuating over here, I really don't care because it didn't impact my system in any way. So I don't have to pass that along to the consumer. The other thing I would tell you is get out of the mindset of buying a la carte. Start thinking of buying in bulk. That is how you have to buy. And once you shift your mindset on that, and this is the other thing that we all tend to ignore when it comes to buying a la carte versus buying in bulk. I'll just use ourselves as an example. If you buy bulk from me, I'm going to ship it to your door. If you take that same volume of meat and you look at it a la carte and you factor in all the time, all the gas, all the other costs that nobody factors into that equation, you paid so much less for the bulk that I shipped to your doorstep that it's not even comparable.
I know, but what about the freezer that you have to buy?
You mean, wait a minute. You mean the freezer that I will give you if you buy a whole or half cow from me?
I'd like that.
I'll take that completely off of your plate.
Am I gonna put it? Will you buy me a bigger garage?
That I can't deal with. That's on you. But yes, let me answer her and then I'll come back to you.
I wanted to comment one another mindset change that happened earlier in my life that I'm grateful of is that the hidden cost of our health is real, and as we age, you will feel all those effects of the poor choices with food. So the investment in our foods from the get-go is hands down much better than the hidden health cost.
100%. Great point. Thank you.
That's what I was about to say. You're investing in your health. Either it's going to cost you up front or it's going to cost you later on when you're trying to figure out what's occurring and then going to the doctors who don't even lead you to the root and so forth. So invest in yourself now so you don't have to invest in the negative way later.
That's right.
But I was going to ask you, how do you suggest that we deal with the emotions of divorcing our labels?
That's a funny question. That's a funny question. That's great. I love it.
So I'm going to just do this just to be respectful. Thank you all so much for coming in and being in attendance. If you have any other questions, please stop by the booth and catch me or my wife Leah. We'll be happy to answer your questions. So thank you all.